being here this morning, and thank you for our panelists to join us today. And we're going to talk a lot about enterprise AI and many good stories behind that. Before we get started, I want to first thank WeWork for generously giving us the space to host this event. Thanks, WeWork. It's been a pretty buzzy week. My name is Jennifer Lee. I'm a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. I have been on the product journey before I started investing. Was actually, fun fact, working with Mahesh at the company Solvy before I got acquired by Zoom. And later, in 2018, I joined ACNZ to lead a lot of our infrastructure and SaaS investments. Of course, AI has been very top of mind for the last 2 years, so I cannot wait to host this great group of panelists to talk about how we're seeing the adoption and the challenges in enterprise. Let me start with a quick introduction. So next to me is Ben. He is the Chief Technology Officer at Box and is responsible for developing Box technology and vision. Before this, Ben was the VP of Product at Box, and before then, he was the founder and CEO of Subspace, which is an enterprise security solution that's acquired by Box. Next to Ben is Mahesh. Mahesh is the head of Product and Revenue Accelerator at Zoom, where he oversees AI and generative AI product strategies across product lines, including leading the creation of Zoom AI Companion. I'm sure if you updated your Zoom, you have seen the product. Mahesh joined Zoom through the acquisition of Solvy, where he was the founding CEO. Solvy is a leading conversational AI platform that reinvented the customer experience for many of the world's leading brands. Last but not least, Robert Ng is the co-founder and CPO of Pylon, where he leads the company's product vision and development. Robert drives Pylon's mission to power customer support teams through AI-driven insights and innovative tools. Before Pylon, Robert was an early engineer at Affinity, where he played a key role on new markets and data enrichment teams. Maybe I'll start the panel with the question of just give us a little bit more context of how your current company and products are actually adopting and embracing AI.
Yep.
I'll start with Ben.
So thank you for having us here. If you don't know Box, we call ourselves the Intelligent Cloud. And so we have over 100,000 customers. We've got over an exabyte of data, and we just passed $1 billion in revenue. And so our whole life is unstructured content, right? So everything that goes into companies about storing things in all the different ways that are not typically stuff that's like structured in databases, but unstructured audio, video, text, and all different forms. So for us, when you say the word generative AI, it's kind of this wonderful thing because it can actually just, like humans, understand and kind of go through what we call unstructured content. So we use AI in a number of ways, but one of the things that our customers like the best is just if you kind of imagine that you have a bunch of content and you want to get some information out of it. Historically, you always had to go through and search for it and click on the thing and read through it and get the answer. But now with generative AI, you can actually just ask AI to basically do that for you. And so we use a number of techniques to do that. We brand this under Box AI. So we have a number of retrieval augmented generation and the ability to kind of use AI to get information for you. In addition to things like structuring unstructured data is another major use case. So this is kind of when we're talking to our customers, these are grabbing insights from your content, unstructuring data. That's kind of our whole world.
Zoom has a wide range of both horizontal applications as well as line of business and verticals. And I think we'll talk more about what some of the differences are we're observing in how Gen AI is being applied in those different spheres. But at the heart of it is, we have Zoom Workplace, which is what most of you would be familiar with: meetings, chat, phone, mail, and so on. But we also have lines of business like Zoom Contact Center, which has been growing very, very fast, as well as a line of business for sales, sales AI, and other areas as well, employee experience. And what I think we've learned, we announced yesterday at Zoomtopia that AI Companion is now adopted by over 4 million businesses, and I think 57% of the Fortune 500. But that number can be a little deceiving because the path to get there has been quite interesting because especially with horizontal applications like knowledge workers use, it's taken companies quite a while to get to the point of enabling and using them. But then once it happened, there's like a hockey stick of adoption, and we can talk more about why that is, in the conversation. But and that's been really fun to watch. I think on our last earnings, which was like 60 days ago, we announced 1.2 million. So we went from 1.2 to over 4 in the last 60 days. So it took us 11 months to get to 1.2. It took us another 60 days to get to 4 point whatever. And I think that's something that for the founders in the room, just something to think about is like it takes a little bit of time. You have to keep chipping away at it and get there. But what's ironic is that in the line of business applications, like contact center, like sales, the adoption curve is like this. And we can talk a little bit more about why that is and the enablement process. If it took 15 meetings to get meeting summary approved at a company, the same company will approve a contact center application in 60 days and with 2 meetings. And I'll close by saying why. The reason is that in those line of business applications, you have established metrics and you have high pressure to make those metrics better. And AI, if you can provably show that you have moved those metrics by 2x, 4x, 8x, they're ready to move. And so I think, it's something that we can talk more about, but, probably a natural segue to what Robert is doing.
I'm sure Mahesh will agree with me on this. In 2018, when we first tried to build AI products, that was definitely not the case. Where when you're trying to push out AI features, the adoption will take a lot longer compared to today when it happens like this. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. The birthday for our company was the same birthday as ChatGPT. So this is like the only world we've ever known as a company. But I guess who here, maybe a show of hands, who here has shared Slack channels or Teams channels with their customers? I'm kind of curious. Right. Okay. So a bunch of you guys, right? So the crazy thing is with Slack and all that unstructured data, that is perfect for LLMs, perfect for Gen AI, right? And so this sort of pattern is what we've sort of fed off of as a company, and that our wedge is the idea that all companies are starting to move to these more unstructured, team-to-team collaboration spots and spaces. And so, you can see that in our product all the way down to, the simplest thing of, taking 1,000 messages and bundling them into units of conversations, all the way up to, the holy grail of support, which is, throwing an AI agent in the mix and having them try and conversationally answer the question for them, go and do research, come back with help for the human agent so that they can debug further. So we're really span the gamut of all the different use cases that you could possibly apply AI into a support system, and hopefully this will expand out to applying AI in pretty much every use case as we grow the company. So
that's awesome. I'll actually do a quick show of hands question too. How many people here are founders? Oh, wow, that's a large majority. What about executives, operators? Okay, great. Students? Great. Well, welcome. Now we know how to, situate the questions and provide the right context given the audience. I'd call the last 2 years is a real AI heat wave. We just had a 2 weeks San Francisco heat wave. We can definitely feel, the temperature there. Mahesh already touched upon sort of the surprises of where the usage being picked up and prevalent. I'm also curious, have you seen areas that you felt AI should have been more, peripheral or should have been, picked up more than what you're seeing today? And I would love to also hear more about, where you're seeing extreme or maybe faster speed of adoption.
So maybe a question, because there's a founder-heavy audience. Have you guys read the book Crossing the Chasm? Or know of it? I recommend it. So to me, the world we're in right now is really crazy because my whole life in my career, it's always been this world where you start out with something, you kind of find these early people who just love, I love this vector database, I love this idea, and then they just get really into technology, and they kind of work for a while on it. Then you kind of have your visionaries who kind of go through, I can see this is going somewhere, and then you spend a lot of time with those people early on, and nobody else, the people who are more practical or skeptical, they kind of stay away from the early stuff. And then you kind of build this nice smooth curve of adoption, and most of your customers come a little bit later. But in the world of generative AI, it's kind of weird that everybody, like across the spectrum, sort of started out as in this world of, I'm going to try this. I'm going to see, like, there's so much discussion, they have to go and do this. And so this is weirdly throws off most adoption curves that I've experienced. So in the early days, you find people who try stuff who like kind of are acting more like you're used to, this like tech visionary early, but then they're extremely skeptical or they're very reluctant. Or somebody who says, this is excellent, I love this, and then they have a long period of time until they actually get around to like adopting it. You were kind of referencing some of the like mini meetings that you have to get them to early adopt. And so I think it's actually a challenge for startups of the day is that some of the conventional wisdom around adoption from an enterprise in particular, you're going to be thrown off by the ratios of like how many people are interested versus how many people are actually ready to adopt, especially when you start to bring in some of the challenges on data and privacy and compliance and so on. So for me, this is we're almost in an uncharted area of adoption because old standards aren't necessarily the thing that will guide you for the future.
I think you have to think about every CEO in the world is under enormous pressure to have a Gen AI story and actually bring it to life and actually show that in some tangible form in their numbers. And sometimes it's expressed as headcount reduction, sadly. Sometimes it's expressed as top-line increase. That's good. But all of them are under pressure. So that pressure is downward from that CEO and the chairman and the board and everybody else to every member of their executive team. But at the same time, there's fear. Every member of that executive team doesn't want to be the one that shows up in the front page of the newspaper because they had a data breach or responsible AI failure. And so what you have is this, I think of it as like fear and greed, both at the same time, both of these very primal emotions that are driving behavior. And so I think if I were to think about it from the founder perspective, I think three things that I would say. One is that be out in front with your posture about your responsible AI. Don't hide it. Publish it. Make it crisp, clear. Answer all the questions that your buyer would have before they even talk to you. Put it on your website. Let them download it. Let them understand it. Because then you dispel the fear, and then they can actually lean in and understand what your value proposition you bring. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, is that really be able to prove the impact on some metric that matters. Because they're not just bringing it in for vanity. I see a lot of startups with what somebody famously coined as ERR, experimental revenue. Where a lot of companies are just bringing in, they're running, and they're like, I have so-and-so as a customer. And I was like, well, your competitors has them also, and they have them. And so what that really is there's 5 POCs, and that company is not really sure which one of them they're going to use. They may even build their own. But the fact of the matter is that you're in there, if you can prove that you're better and you're actually reducing cost or increasing top line, you have a really good chance to win. So that's number two. Really prove the outcomes. Prove the outcomes. The ROI is hard to prove in some cases. People have fluffy metrics. Avoid those. Go after the stuff that they also measure and matter. And the third thing is, this is the lesson I think I learned from working with Eric Yuan, the founder of Zoom, is it always comes down to, is it easy to use? Eric is relentless about saying customer obsession. And when he means customer obsession, he literally means you should be able to turn something on and it should just work. And it just works is constantly in our company we talk about, does it just work? Is it easy? Do I have to send someone out to train you on how to use something? If so, he hates that. I mean, he gets really upset if you're making someone find it, find something, it's hidden. So I think as founders, if you think about those three things: responsibility, being out in front with that, being really thoughtful about it, making sure that the ROI story is crystal clear, measurable, and provable, and most importantly, that it's in the flow of work. People don't want to learn new skills. Find the work they're already doing, do it better, use AI, show that it can be done easily and better. You have a winning formula. So I think these are the three things that I would say, are the lessons at least that we've learned so far.
Yeah, I've honestly forgot what the original question was, but I would love to add on to that. I ditto everything that you just said. And I think from our experience when we were going through like YC, and like we see a lot of other founders out there, with every AI startup, it's always like a solution in search of a problem, right? People are just throwing AI at it because at like random problems because they think AI is cool, but it's just the wrong approach. You have to come at it from like some customer problem, some like pain somewhere out there in the market, and I think like that is the biggest flaw of where we see people stumble when they're trying to found an AI startup. I feel like it's like coming at it with the wrong intention. The point of a business is to create value somehow, not shove AI into somebody's company. So I think like just keep in mind that like you're not trying to create a solution. You're trying to like solve somebody's problem more so.
Great. Since we're already on this topic, and I'll come back to the challenges question later. It's true that even from investors' point of view, the last year or year and a half, when we're, taking founder pitches, there are a lot of, I'd say interest driven by the novelty effect of AI, of like where you can, really have that aha or wow moment, and the cool demos is really, what's blowing up on Twitter. But if you really tie it down to, business metrics, the ROIs, like a lot of it, just went away. And then I tangibly feel this, like this year, I think there's way more, tying to the ground of like thinking about how do we improve efficiency, productivity, especially in enterprise and, business work settings. So I'm actually curious from, again, the panelists, given you're working with customers day to day, and you probably are also users of, AI products yourself, like what are the things, whether metrics-wise, ROI-wise, that you see are biggest drivers of adoption? Like, is it efficiency? Is it bottom line? Is it top line? Is it really like individual workers? How do you each think about that? And maybe this time I'll start from Robert.
Yeah, I guess like what we see when we talk to customers is like two models form. The first is like the VP or like the IC or the person who's actually using the AI is the one who adopts it. And usually there's like great adoption there. They know what they want. They go out and find that tool. I think the other model that we see is this like top-down model where an exec is like, to your point before, like an exec comes down and is like, hey, you need to implement AI, and I think you should be implementing it this way. And usually when that happens, like the IC is like, well, this is just getting forced on me. It's getting implemented in this way where it's not solving my pains. It's just some intuition that the exec sort of like came up with when they were taking a nap or something like that. And I think like you need to be very mindful that like you're trying to solve for some business pain, and that business pain is at the IC level. It's not. Like you still have to convince the exec at the end of the day, but like it's much easier if you get that champion who's on the ground for them to go and convince the exec to like buy your product or like build whatever you're trying to do.
So imagine a Zoom customer, an enterprise that has 100,000 employees, right? Every one of them is using Zoom all day. They use their meetings, they're doing phone calls, they're using Zoom team chat, they're in Zoom producing information, consuming information all day long. But within that company, and so everybody is a knowledge worker in that company typically, and they're all using it for a variety of tasks, projects, and so on. Then you have line of business within that company. You probably have, if it's a B2B company, 15% of the people are in some sales revenue generation roles. Another 10% are in support roles of some sort. They're dealing with customer experience and so on. And then you have another group of people who's responsible for employee experience and making sure that people are HR and employee experience. So if you think about all 100,000 people need something that can make them more productive. That's one dimension. And so how do you measure that dimension? You have to measure it by general productivity gains. So we think of things like meeting summary, meeting notes, being able to join a meeting late, catch me up. Those are applicable to everyone, and those are measurable, but the measures are how much time did I save you? The soft measures would be things like, hey, by not taking notes, I can actually focus on what you're saying. I don't have to remember everything. My notes are better. I can follow up better. That's useful for all 100,000. But you go to the sales organization, and they have 15,000 people. You know what they care about? Making the number. That quarter, they want to make the number. You go to the support organization, you know what they care about? First call resolution, average handle time going down, CSAT, NPS, whatever the measure is. And they want the end user experience of their brand to be first class, right? So they're using the same types of AI techniques. You're summarizing a call between an agent and a human being. You're summarizing a call between a prospect and the seller. But what you do with that information, how you produce it, what you do with it, you have to what you integrate with the CRM, the things vary dramatically, and the willingness to pay is quite different because the measurement is very different. You know, if the CRO believes that you can help them make the number, they're going to spend money fast. Anything that can move the top line, they're going to spend. Or if the support leader feels that you can drive the cost down and keep CSAT high, they're going to spend. So you really have to think about your persona. It always comes down to the persona. And do you know your persona so well that you could actually articulate the pain? As Robert said, do you know their pain? And the best for me is when you've actually lived the pain. Then you actually don't have to articulate. You don't have to go find it, but that's not always possible. Sometimes you have to discover it. But that's kind of how I think we think about it at Zoom, is that personas have different needs and they measure differently. And we have to, at Zoom, we have to do it all. So we have to attack all of them. But you may not as a founder. You might be attacking just one area. So that.
Yeah, I think so. One of the ongoing challenges with generative AI is it's just an incredibly capable new technology that sort of changes the way that people can, like, what's possible. And so I think different companies approach this idea of what value they're bringing in different ways. So some companies do the more platform-oriented, I can do so many different things, and some more have the, like, I can do this one thing and do it well. And depending on how you think through this, the metrics that you use can be very different. So in one world, you can be like, this thing drives a lot of value, but if you're more platform-oriented, you have to say, like, it can do so many different things and almost like a long tail of different pieces of value. So for us, we kind of try to do the platform world in addition to sort of point solutions. And the thing that we've noticed is people will quickly go to the world of productivity, right? Because a huge amount of value for enterprise will be productivity across their, like, how they think of it. And then that immediately has some challenges, right? When they're like, well, first of all, how do you measure output of a typical employee? Like, how do you measure value? And then at some point, then it runs straight into the, like, I wonder if this is going to reduce people, but then am I going to do that in the short term? And it becomes this very hard thing to measure. So to the question, if people were to sort of like focus on what's the best metric, for me, it's you with an individual customer, talk to them about some leading metric that then leads up to something that you call productivity. So I was just talking to a customer yesterday, and one of the things that they were using Box for is they just dumped all of their, like, sales material and product material onto this what we call a hub. And they had this metric that they use, which is when the salespeople are talking to customers, they noticed that if there was a complex question, sometimes the salesperson doesn't know the answer. It's like, complex product. So they said, let me get back to you. And then they had this metric, which was the number of let me get back to yous. And they kind of noted that the chance of a sale went down if you had a let me get back to you too many times, because then you had to go, that's not only was it like a lot of work, a salesperson has to go check with somebody, read some stuff, but if in real time they could actually get the answer and they could tell somebody, then it kind of increases confidence, the customer's happier. And so they then started to measure this metric of, can we reduce the let me get back to yous from, 3 per call or whatever the number is down lower using, AI to help you look up some information. And so that is an example of, like, it's not a CEO level metric. It's not something where you're like, how many millions of dollars did I save, or how did it increase my top line directly? But it is certainly a leading indicator for productivity, and also for something like maybe they could generate more revenue because their salespeople are more efficient. So I would in general suggest that although you always keep in mind the top level, like closer to the revenue metrics, you usually need a bunch of leading metrics or small little wins that are very practical to be able to then kind of ladder up to that level.
That's a really great point, which is very relevant to my next question, actually. I'd love to hear a bit more about, like, where you're still seeing challenges of, like, the AI adoption or the feature set adoption. And one of them is, like, how do you sort of accumulate these small wins into a big win where it can become sort of more transformational and impact the business metrics? And also on the user behavior side, I can share one of the challenges I've seen and also, maybe overcome a little bit is I always laugh or, like, think about the time we were laughing about prompt engineering. It's called prompt engineering because it's like writing natural language, but it's called engineering. And now I think everybody agrees it's kind of engineering work because you really have to think about what the structure you want to get out of the LLMs. And it's so powerful, but so flexible. Like, every time when you see a open text box, you can really tell it anything, but it can also give you back anything that you don't really have, expectation of what this feature is supposed to do. So when we're like, especially when I was looking at these, data enrichment tools where it just says like, what column do you want to create? Like, how do I think about that column to be created? And I saw these prompt that's already pre-built that tells me this is the structure I want to come back. This is, a yes or no question. Give me the answer and confidence score. Like, then you're getting really the answer you want to get. Like, that's a actual education and also onboarding built into the product that I think a lot of, if you just really rely on the user with open text box, it's really hard to get to that level of, understanding affinity. So I'm actually very curious to hear from the panelists where you're seeing these kind of, small challenges or big challenges for AI to still be adopted and where you're seeing that's working within your products.
Sure. I think you can think in two dimensions. One dimension is there are such scenarios where you have to help your users understand how to use the technology. But I think it's creative also to think about ways in which you can completely remove them from the frame of having to learn anything. And I'll give you an example. If we work with a very large financial planning firm that uses Zoom, they use our revenue product, and every day financial planners are talking to clients like any of you, and they're talking to them about various topics, right? College planning, wealth planning, estate planning, whatever, taxes, whatever. That planner actually doesn't want to learn AI. They don't want to chat. They don't want to type anything into a box at all. They just want to have them Zoom meeting. They want to press one button, record, or not even record. You can summarize without recording, and they want that conversation notes to be perfectly fielded with, categorized into those categories. We talked about estate planning for 5 minutes. We did this. And they want that pushed into the CRM because their manager wants to know, did they do the call and what did they do? And there's 1,000, and they have to do 15 calls. They get paid by how many calls they do in a day. They don't get paid by how many search boxes, how many letters they type into a chat bot. They get paid by that. So if you're building for that audience, your first thought should be, I don't want them to type anything. I just want I want the flow of work to just happen. And everybody wins, right? The manager gets to see all the notes in the CRM. The financial planner is really focused on you, the client, and they're doing a better job. And all the make work that they hated doing, that 1 hour a day that they had to do at the end of the day, is gone. They just have to review the notes and clean them up. So that's one scenario, and that's a good one. But then you have the average knowledge worker where you may have to teach them. You may have to bring the hero stories of your application front and center to them. You may have to give them that first thing that I always think, like in any business, what's the aha moment? In the demo and the thing, what's the moment when the customer goes, oh my God, I can do that? And so you have to think the same way about a user. What's that thing that gets the user to say, that's addictive. I'll use it again and again. And that's where you can put good prompts in and other things. But sometimes you should think about avoiding that entirely. How do you just not even make that possible? How can you just do the work without even having them think that way? So I think both things. Get the hero stories out when you do need them to take an action, and other times do the hero work for them without them having to take an action.
So for me, my last two customer conversations are quite interesting on this topic. Sometime this week, I was talking to a customer. They brought some senior AI-oriented people, this big company, and they liked what they're like, this is interesting, they're a current Box customer. And then they, the next day, they enabled it for 115,000 people. The CEO sent this email, like, check this out, kind of like excited, kind of the aha moment. And so that's kind of example one of like what can be done in some cases. Example two, I just got this email like right before this started. I talked to a customer in April. And we showed them there's this lease company. They had like tens of thousands of these leases, and it was very complex for them to get all the data out in a way. It was very important. They had like the current process was very manual, expensive. 4 people had to look at it, and we showed them like, oh, you can get the data out in this way. And they're like, this is amazing. This is going to save us so much time. This is wonderful. We'll get right back to you. And then it's October. I had forgotten all about this, and they just emailed me like, oh, I just got it approved. I'm super excited still. Like, and for me, it's like really that's a weird thing to happen. Is that like somebody who is so interested and so excited, but also introduces this delay. And so to the challenge that I think is actually extremely common in most enterprises is they are scared of AI for all sorts of reasons. And it inherently can interrupt their adoption cycles the moment you hear them say, oh, let me go to my AI council. I'm curious about the new European law that came out. the word training scares the shit out of most of our customers, because wait, who's, are we opting in or out, and how does this work? And so each of these things sort of gets in the way. And if I go back to the sort of crossing the chasm analogy, there's the skeptics and the people who are typically in the back half. They have justified fears, and you made the point of if they have any one of 10 fears, they're going to be slow to get through it all. And then naturally, in some cases, they will be slow. So there's a ton of opportunity left over, I think, in AI, because it's going to be a while before most enterprises actually adopt things. But don't expect that everybody's like this. Oh, it seems so interesting, and I can move, boom, and make it happen. Instead, it's more of the very common is, I'm so excited, I can't wait to review this in a council that will be in 6 weeks from now, so that I can then move to a pilot with 4 people, and then move to 8 people, and then and that is it's just the nature, I think, of enterprises, and many of them are naturally conservative.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think something in there resonated with me. We have a clause in our contracts that are all we will never train on any of your data. We have contracts in place with OpenAI. It's 0-day retention, or data retention, and everybody's lawyers still freak out about that. And so at some point you just have to be okay, we'll self-host OpenAI on Azure, which is just equivalent to just using OpenAI's API endpoint, but it does put them at ease. So it's a great upsell opportunity at some point to get more money out of your contracts. But I think taking a step back, the broader message here is one of the biggest challenges with AI is trust. Can they trust the output of this thing? If this is in a business critical flow, can they trust that it won't tell the customer you're a dum-dum or something like that? It could go totally off the rails, which is not what you want in front of something customer facing. So we always think of it as there's this curve of how business critical is this feature that you're trying to implement AI with, and all the way to oh, it's not actually that critical at all. And there's only a handful of ways you can really make that increase that trust that they have in an AI feature. I think one, it's user education. What are the limits of this thing? And honestly, a lot some of our support volume is just educating them on, hey, this is how our AI feature works. This is how it's good. This is how it's bad. And so people have set better expectations when they do see something that's unintuitive to them, but it's actually correct in how we tried to build it. I think the second way to build trust is you really bake it into the product. You have some testing framework, so they can really play with it and build that confidence before they release it onto the world and put it in front of a customer. And then maybe third is just straight up improving your AI model, or improving your prompts, doing that prompt engineering and iterating on it. I think early on we have a lot of different prompts running all the time in our product with the bundling, the status changes, and oftentimes if it's waiting on you, that's fine. Your team should be looking at it. But if we accidentally say it's waiting on the customer, but it's actually waiting on you, that's a disaster scenario, right? The customer might be give me the contract, but we said it's waiting on the customer. So it's very important to try and iterate on that and just get it better. It takes a day to iterate on prompts, right? It's not that hard, but you still have to really put in the effort. But that being said, maybe even taking a further step back in the broader macro conditions here, just because LLMs have come out, I feel people just trust AI a lot more than they did pre-2021, pre-2020. So I feel we're saying all this doom and gloom about trust. But
well, I mean, I'll riff off what you're saying there is trust, I think, is really critical. And we have an advantage, which is that we store our customers' data. We have it. We process, we move it around for them. And so they trust us inherently. We have these we meet every compliance standard in the world, and trust is just fundamental to everything we do. And every meeting I have with customers, I have to say at least 3 times, we're not training on your data. Your data is your data. Here's a contract that we will promise you all these things, 0 retention. And they're just obsessed with this. And so although AI, they trust the idea of it more, they are way more concerned that something is going to happen. So we have our normal terms of service, which actually cover everything. And then we say, here's our AI addendum, and we promise you all the things you're worried about won't happen. And so I'll just say, I feel maybe some of us are like some of the most trusted, enterprise SaaS tools out there. And it's a challenge for us. So I would imagine if you're in a startup, like talking to somebody, especially if you're touching their data, you have to like maybe not say 2 times, say 4 times. Like they have to know that like they're not becoming your product as you're sucking your data in. Or if that's part of your business plan, like then make sure you handle that in a way so they can then trust you as you deal with that. I think it's maybe the one critical thing that I've learned for enterprises is how much without trust, no AI happens.
Yeah, I think that phrase that he said is, you should all remember it. The customer doesn't want to become your product. That's really what they mean when they say protect my data. They don't want to become. You've seen that in the consumer world with search, and all of our data is out there, and we get the ads and the targeting. That businesses don't want that. I would say that Zoom has a very interesting business, right? About half of our business is online and SMB, and half of it is mega enterprise, very large. And the behavior is radically different. Enterprises want to hear your AI story, your roadmap. They have lots of questions about the trust, the responsibility. They want minute details. They want white papers. They want all of that. The small business is actually nervous about AI. All the data that you see is small businesses are a little intimidated by AI. They don't know quite what to do with it. They're more interested in IA. Sometimes I say it's intelligent automation. It's not AI. And that helps. But they're also very willing to try. So at the same time, they're willing to dip their toes in. They're all using ChatGPT on the one hand, and then so they want to try some of it. But they're also they don't know what they don't know. So I think it very much depends on the segment you're serving. Like really understand your segment. Because the segment, I don't think is one size fits all in the way they think about AI and what their fear is or what their acceptance is. I think it's radically different. We deal with all of those segments, so I see it. And so you should really be thoughtful about what their fears, what their concerns are, and address it. Because we had to build maybe 1,000 feature requests into AI Companion just for meetings post the launch in September of 2023 that came out of just like enterprises. Hey, somebody joined the meeting late and they weren't on the invitee list. Should they be able to ask a question and catch me up from a meeting that they joined? It's a corner case. But it's a corner case that if you're having a board meeting and someone joins and was invited in and they asked the question and said, are we going to make our number this quarter? That's disastrous, right? So we better that's a feature request we better implement tomorrow. Right? But the small business isn't thinking about those things. They're just thinking like, hey, are you going to use my data and sell my data and that kind of thing. So you really have to think about your segments a lot.
Yeah, I've heard so many different stories and interesting stories about those corner cases in productivity tools and in communication especially. Like, how do you really think about, the different roles and when they come and what kind of information they're getting? It's on its own a very interesting problem to solve. I feel like I can probably keep asking questions for the next hour. This is such an interesting topic and top of mind for you, but I would love to leave some time for the audience, given, there are a lot of founders here and a lot of, operators. We probably have very burning questions. So maybe I'll hand over my mic to Griffin, if you don't mind. There's a mic. Great. Just show your hand if you have a question, and you get the mic.
Thank you. I had a question for all three of you. And I guess it covers for the founders in the room as well. What roles do you see evolving into AI deployment roles internally as an operator? And then for the founders in the room, who are they selling to going forward the next 6 to 12 months?
Can you define deployment role?
I guess the people who are implementing tools like Pylon at their larger scale mid-market to enterprise businesses for support or, say, sales, larger human capital pieces of the organization?
I mean, I think the persona hasn't necessarily changed, or there hasn't been a new role that has formed out of nothing, I guess. I think the one shift that we are so I guess the person who still implements us is still going to be the head of support, head of success, that role. I do think though on our end, I think we noticed that you do need slightly more technical people interfacing with them. So for example, if we were maybe not so AI heavy and didn't have to integrate with a lot of their systems, we might have been able to get by with an implementation success manager or something like that. but instead we opted to hire like a solutions engineer where she's fairly technical, but still customer facing. So I think that like maybe that's what you're getting at, and that's what your question is, but it's like, it's more like you need somebody who's a little more technical to be able to like integrate into their systems. Same thing with support. Like instead of getting a normal support person, we've opted to get like a more technical like support engineer, because like we know that like down the line when we have AI agents and AI agents need to interface with their back end, like somebody's going to have to help them set up those API endpoints. Somebody's going to have to like connect that up with our AI agents and what the actions the AI agent could take. And so like we see that like it's shifting to be a little more technical.
Yeah, yesterday we had a fireside chat panel with Bill McDermott, the CEO of ServiceNow, and he was a board member of Zoom. And he cited a statistic that like 2031, there's going to be 20 million net new jobs created by Gen AI. So the question is, what are those jobs? Because everybody's hearing the other story, like fewer jobs, fewer this, you don't need that. I think we're seeing it now. I think what it is that when you're doing all these transactions, these high velocity things that AI is producing a lot of output, you need a lot of people to analyze that data to figure out what actually works and what doesn't. So there's a whole layer of analytics and now that Gen AI makes it so easy to get analytics, but that doesn't necessarily make it easy for you to see the signal from the noise. So the more people you have that can help you get signal from noise from the data that you're collecting as a founder, but can more importantly, or equally importantly, is those people who can go to the customer and express that in a way that the customer understands that signal from noise. Because you're asking, in many of the cases, you're asking your customer to connect a lot of very vital data to you. The CRM data, the support data, you name it, right? Snowflake data, it could be anything. And they're actually not as, the LLM is allowing you to see things that nobody could see before. Patterns and things. So I'd say the number one thing I look for now if I'm trying to hire somebody is, do they have like really strong pattern recognition skills, and do they understand like the big picture and can dive down to the small and go back and forth and explain it? Like when you talk
You're
about
matching
explainability,
an LLM to a higher person now.
right?
The pattern
Exactly.
matching.
You have to explain. It's a new kind of explainability. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
think from my view on your question, it depends on the time frame that you asked about. But like I'm maybe different people have would say this is controversial, but I'm not seeing new roles in general. I'm seeing the same kinds of things that people used to do at AI. So like we have an IT person who's responsible for deploying across a big company and enterprise. Yeah, okay, that person now has to deal with AI and all their products. You have people who are line of business who has to deal with, okay, that person also deals with AI. You have an innovation group or somebody whose job is to like think globally across organizations. That person's focused on AI. So for me, most enterprises actually just adopted or sort of added the word AI to a bunch of roles as opposed to saying, I have a net new, different way to approach it. And who knows how that changes in time, but like for me, that's I see that more than some new form of how this all works.
Hi, my name is Wayne, and I'm building a data platform for climate change data. And my question is, with your horizontal solutions, how do you think about identifying and prioritizing the ICP and the use cases? Because you can attack a whole bunch of different things.
I think I should know this, but can you define ICP for me?
Ideal customer profile.
Yeah, I think for Zoom, people use it every day, every minute, all the time. So I think our horizontal use cases kind of are more about what the persona is and how they're using it. So, we have I think 36, yesterday I think we cited it, with 36% market share in telemedicine. It's the number one telemedicine. So they're still using Zoom meetings. They're using the meetings SDK. They're doing things. But what they're doing with it is very different, right? A clinician who's meeting with you is taking clinical notes. It's very different than a project manager using the Zoom meeting to have a meeting and doing whiteboarding. So we actually have to think more about building an application that can serve all those things first. It just has to work reliably for everybody. And then we can start building the layers of customization or personalization on top. The last 10% can be, getting those notes in a clinical notes format versus a sales output format or that. That's the last 10%. But the first thing I have to do is be amazingly good at transcription, right? I have to be amazingly good at translation or language localization. Those are core capabilities that everybody in the horizontal is going to use. And then the line of business are going to need the top up to say, how do I get medical terminology to be better understood by the same transcription engine? But I don't want medical transcription to be operating when I'm a salesperson, because it doesn't matter, right? It would actually skew the wrong way. So it's about getting that 90% right that all the horizontals need, and then featureizing for the verticals with the last 10% that the line of business would need.
Yeah. I guess I would like to put this question in the context of like a startup, right? I think like for every startup, you start with the most narrowest of niches, and like honestly, like the economy is large, so you can pick any niche anywhere, but you just need to start somewhere, and wherever you think is most opportune, and then you sort of like expand that ICP slowly but surely as you grow as a company. So for example, for us, we started very narrow, like tech companies that only talk to their customers on Slack, who also have Zendesk and Intercom, and like it was like super narrow. But like over time, we've expanded it to be like, okay, we're going to support the like support persona of every like series or seed to like Series D stage company. And I think you like slowly do this like step function until you get to like something massive, like a Zoom or a Box, right? Where you're sort of like serving like a whole lot of people who, for us, that would be like anybody who's talking to a customer, right? We could eventually expand into account management, PMs, like sales, right? But I do think that for where you're at, like I do think that you do have to follow this progression of expanding the ICP like as you move along. And I feel like right now it's just like where do you think is most opportune?
So to your point, so at Box, we have every size company across the whole world and every geography. No industry makes up more than 8 to 10% of like whatever we do. So we have a product principle which is like don't focus on any one industry. And this is maybe like we're very platform and content is quite generic. So we build capabilities that help people use AI and content across the board. I don't recommend what I'm telling you here as a startup. You can't do that because no one wants to buy a generic platform, but without some killer use cases, and so you kind of have to start from that angle. But to answer your question is my job is to say, what is everything I can do with content in the world? What's everything I can do with AI? And then provide it both in a customizable, in addition to an easy-to-use way, and then just give that to all our customers.
Yeah. Hey, so we're building AI application security engineers, and a lot of the enterprise sales stories of having zero-day data retention is like really, it mirrors our experience a lot. Where we've come into a lot of trouble is like, let's say a customer comes with a bug with the AI, and you're like, okay, well, how do I debug this? And with zero-day data retention, obviously, it's hard to replicate that environment. How do you guys go about resolving these issues?
It's hard, and it's something that is you have to, like, there's a difference between a consumer AI company and an enterprise AI company, in my opinion, which is this point. We are not allowed to look at the data, for sure. We are not allowed to look at the question. We're not allowed to look at the answer. We're not allowed to look at any of it. And so we have to rely on customer feedback or them bringing stuff to us. We have a very specific way that you deal with this. And so if you're a consumer-oriented company who's looking at your data, like, lucky you. If you are an enterprise one, to the advice before, be very strict about how this works so that customers, because if they're not thinking about it and they start to think about it, you better have good answers for them. But we have to just employ different techniques. We use AI graders to try to determine quality. So we have AI answer the question, then another AI, like, I wonder if that's a good question. I mean, like, here's a question to answer in a document. Like, is this a good answer? Like, and that kind of thing helps us. But at the end of the day, we have to work directly with customers, and they choose what to share with us because their data is incredibly sensitive. And so we just kind of handle it painfully. And I don't know of any other way, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, first of all. It's a really thoughtful question. We do a number of things. So one is we make it very clear who, in those situations where they report a bug, and then we need to get the data we need to get more from which meeting ID was it, which thing was it, can we get the file? We actually make it clear who is going to see that data. And we say this group of people and nobody else will see it. So there's actually a specialist group that just will do that analysis. And we have to be very careful to say that data will never leave. Of course, we're not going to use the data for any other reason other than troubleshooting. So we make it very clear it's only for troubleshooting. It'll only be seen by this small group, and we're only going to use it to solve your problem, and then we're going to never look at the data again, and we're going to get rid of it. I think when you say those three things, people are very willing because they want the problem solved, they want the bug fixed, and they're willing to do it. So if you do those three things, I think it will be no problems.
Great. I saw one more hand over there. Maybe the last question. Oh, okay. Yep.
Hello, my name is Tim. I am the head of Confluent for Startups, so a little bit of corporate engagement. And my question really is for Jennifer and Robert, and that is, with the flow of early-stage startups looking for funding around AI, how do you filter out what you think is really interesting to look at? And what can you tell us without being proprietary about what really catches your attention? And Robert, to your point, when you were raising for your A round, how did you feel that you were able to kind of cut through all the other competition that you had getting into the room and getting the interest of leading AI, leading VCs?
Yeah, it's a really good question because there's so many areas and spaces that are super interesting. I felt like I have always been a hardcore enterprise infra person, but in the last couple of years, I've been more like consumery because a lot of these, design creative tools are very much picked up by consumer and, creators. 11 Labs is a great example like that. I guess given, I came from product background and I still think about early stage investing is identifying product market fit. Like I really look for if this is a behavior that's already, becoming a pattern. And if it's, again, going back to the panelist answers earlier, if it's truly delivering like, a 10x, 5x, 10x, 100x sometimes value to end users and who those end users are, going back to the ICP question, like, is this a very tangible and going to be long-living behavior? And that's why I think, a lot of, maybe you'll see this on Twitter or you see this online, like a lot of investors are really indexing, not just on the experience itself, there's novelty, there's really cool experiences, but really the retention of that experience, and then how does it really translate into the commercial side of outcomes. And sometimes the second part maybe not as obvious as the first part, like we'll still need to figure out how do you really monetize these type of behaviors, but I think the first cannot go away. Like if this is something people are really thinking of using, really interested in it, and continue to use it day in and day out.
Yeah, and I guess, well, probably Jennifer can speak to why she invested in us, but better than I can say. But I do think that we always keep in mind that AI in and of itself is not a product. Like, it's just a feature that you put in a product. Like, I think there were a lot of, like, ChatGPT wrappers and just, like, people just throwing AI at, like, generating SQL statements. And those aren't companies in and of themselves. You still need something else that's, like, difficult, like a UI around it, like some other value prop that you can give your customer. Otherwise, it's like totally not defensible. Like somebody else could just come along and like use the same AI model, right? It's all AI will eventually just all be commoditized. So you need something else beyond that. And I think like to your point, that like at the end of the day, you still need the same metrics and like you need to provide some kind of like extra like value that some previous company was solving. So like for us, it's like we're helping people run their support team, right? Like we're replacing Zendesk. Like it's not just like a tiny little like feature on top of it. Like I think you do need to provide that greater value prop. I think the second kind of company that I see out there, this is not how we are, but that survives as an AI company, is if you have like a unique data set. I often see that as very successful. I can't really speak to that as much, but I do notice if you have something unique about like what you can shove into your AI model and it produces better outputs, then like that is also a differentiation. So that's how I think of it.
Yeah, and just really quickly touch on like, one of the reasons in this context why we invest in Pylon is if there's one use case, and there's a general use case you can think of LLMs are really good at, is really sifting through a very noisy, large amount of data. And that's, the theme across all three companies. Zoom is a lot of communication data. Box just stores like all your data. And then, of course, support and customer success is like, very noisy and very important customer interactions. There are a lot of companies solving the deflection problem or like automation problem, but really as a support team and you're using the systems day in and day out as support agents, how do you sift through the data and like improve the, how you prioritize customers' flow? Like that's, I think, what I saw in sort of the Pylon products. It's not about taking over. It's how to give you more power. Yep. Last question, and then I'd love to respect the
All right,
panelist time.
My name's David. I'm the co-founder of Chronicler. We were in A16Z speedrun doing gaming stuff, but now we're kind of like in pivot mode, like looking more at like AI B2B SaaS. So this is kind of like a related question to the last question, but this is kind of maybe more relevant as the AI market matures. So like when AI first kind of hit the market in a big way, I feel like it was more 10x. Like a lot of the solutions were so different for companies to adopt that it was maybe like easier for them to adopt them. But like as the market matures and there's a lot more inertia, especially from large companies that are already using existing AI solutions, I'm just kind of curious, like, how you would approach it. I mean, from all of you, actually, from like a big company perspective or like a startup perspective, like, how do you overcome that inertia? Like, do you look to 10x still, like in like less known places, or do you just try to like incrementally improve and compete with other existing solutions? Kind of a very general question, but
maybe I'll start. Like for all the founders in the room, you guys have a very hard time, of course, and I remember the days of this. And but I always, when I meet a founder, to be it's great work. Like it's hard every single day for everything you're doing, and quite a pivot you're looking into from gaming to. But I think somebody said it earlier. Find a problem that you can solve and solve really well is kind of the underlying essence. Don't get too caught up in the word AI or the hype or whatever. Just that if you really understand an issue and you're like, well, like I can do that way better than somebody else can because I understand this well and I'm going to put my time into it and I'm going to focus and do it the best, then that's the thing that makes the generic successful company. And it's not, I don't think it's about catching the trends or doing it. It's hard to predict, right? So I would just focus on finding something to solve as opposed to finding the right words to use to describe what you're going to do.
Yeah, customer obsessed, problem obsessed. If you're customer obsessed and you're deep and you're really understanding the problem and the pain, and I could stop you in the hallway and you could express that to me very clearly, then I know that you're actually not. There's no AI market. I think this idea that there's an AI market, there's no AI market. There's a market for lawyers who want to do this, and there's accountants that want to do this, and invoice processors that want to do X. AI is a way to make that happen, as Robert said. But the question is, do you know deeply what the lawyer is struggling with or what the accountant is struggling with? And can you solve, and are you so obsessed with doing it better that you just can't sleep until you fix it? I mean, I think that's really what you would see every time you talk to a founder, you would know.
100%. With that note, maybe I'll wrap up the panel here. And if the panelists can stay for a few minutes for questions and mingle, it'll be great. I will say, again, thank you for the amazing panelists sharing your knowledge, your experience, and wisdom. And thank you, Zoom, Griffin, actually putting this event together. And thanks again, VWork, for generously giving us the space. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everybody.